Yay, now I can hear everybody else.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Well, is it okay if I'm unmasked?
Doesn't bother me.
It seems like most people are okay with that. Just want to be sensitive.
How's Charity?
She's doing well. Yeah. I feel like it's big news today. I've been able to smell the bread that's been baking in the oven,
Nice.
which I haven't been able to smell or taste. Neither of us have. So I was happy to be able to smell the fresh bread. Yeah. You don't really ever think about how smell affects your world.
Right.
So. Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Good. How are you?
Fine. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. I feel like it's been a very long time since I've seen you.
This is great. Okay, I'm like, did you have enough handouts for everybody?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Gonna bring my big tablet, use that, but John needed it.
Oh, yeah.
We have this? Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll start reading it to save paper. But this is nice.
Hey, Melody,
Yes,
are you able to see me
yes, I am.
and see everyone also?
Yes.
All right, great.
I can't see her though. Is she in the office?
I'm at home.
Now I see her.
So, yeah. Melody, you are up on the TV right now. So everyone can see you.
Oh, okay.
Um,
That's not preferable, probably.
Well, anybody who talks and that is online will be like.
Okay,
So
so you're up now, right? You were just talking, so you should be up, right?
yeah.
Okay.
We'll give you more fun.
I'm a little concerned because when I got on early, I muted myself and I got this message and it said I will not record if you're muted. So I'm a little concerned about muting myself. So, but it's pretty quiet at my house and I put a note on the door for my husband. So hopefully we won't get feedback or something.
Are you down?
Yes,
Are opening him?
Yeah. Melody, do you mind saying something real quick?
Hello, this is Melody. Glad everybody could make it.
All right. Well, it is 6:03 and we will go ahead and get started. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you that we can gather together and open up your word and search you in God, I just pray that you will open up our eyes and our minds and our hearts to receive what you have for us this evening. And I just pray that it will be a really fun time to be able to dig into your scriptures. I pray that you will speak through me and use my preparation or don't. God, I just pray that you will just use me to edify us all in your word. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so you should have the handouts in front of you. I just want to go over a few objectives real quick. Yeah, I really hope that by the end of these 5 weeks that we can do this. Summarize the Old Testament narrative. This is just on the front page of the handouts. Summarize the Old Testament narrative. So, yeah, if you have a few minutes with somebody that you don't know and they ask you, what's the Old Testament about? I just want you to be able to say, no, it's about God. And
Oh,
how
hi,
he's-
I haven't seen you for a long time. Let me tell you what I know about the Old Testament.
Yeah, I'm sure you're dying to know.
It's just last week, in fact.
Yeah. So summarize the Old Testament, navigate the different parts of the Old Testament. There are tons of different parts, from the law, the prophets, history, the Psalms, writings, all of these different parts. I also want you to be able to relate difficult passages that we have in the Old Testament to the overall narrative of the Old Testament. So say we're reading in Leviticus, which we will be tonight, and we come across something like you can't sit on the seat of, you can't sit in the same seat that a lady who has been on her period, she's been saved, right? That, what do you do? Or
I still follow
need some water.
that. I know. I can't help it.
Do you go around that?
Yeah, really.
Are you wanting to sit?
Things to get that through.
I can't hear. She can't hear.
Sure.
Okay.
That's okay.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so also things like, what do we do with all of the killings in the Old Testament? How do we relate that to the overall narrative of the Old Testament? I want you to be able to, explain the significance of having one God of the Old Testament. So we know that the Old Testament and New Testament seem to be different. And some people have gone so far as to say that there's a different God of the Old Testament than there's a different God of the New Testament. And so hopefully throughout the class, by the end, I hope that you have an understanding of the significance of having one God of both the Old and the New Testament, and that there's no contradictory aspects in there. And then finally, I hope that you will be able to locate Old Testament prophecies. So there are a lot of prophets, a lot of things that the Lord says through the prophets and other folks, I'd say, about what will come and who is coming. And so, not that you have to be able to find every single one by the end of this session, but at least you'll have the tools to be able to when you're reading the Old Testament, that something will go off in your head and say, hey, this is a prophecy. Let's dig into this and let's see what's going on. So those are just a few objectives that I feel like will be a good start. All right, class overview. Today we'll go over the world of the Old Testament. What I mean is just kind of looking at the historical background of some of it, and its vast timeline, and kind of looking at the literary aspect of the actual writing, because it is a book after all. And we'll also be talking about some of the parts of the Old Testament. And next week, we'll go over the progression, the progress of redemption. So we'll look at what God is doing throughout the whole Old Testament. So I'll go through from beginning to end within an hour, and have this summary essentially of what God is doing, and how it's all pointing to the Messiah. The week after, we'll go through the whole Old Testament again through the lens of Jesus Christ. So we know from Luke 24, Jesus walks with the two disciples to Emmaus, and he explains to them everything from Moses and the prophets concerning him. So we'll have the same kind of timeline, but through a different lens, through a different perspective, through the lens of Jesus. And then the fourth week, we'll go over some of the Old Testament prophecies. We'll just kind of get into some of the prophets and look at what the Lord told them to tell the people who to look for in the Messiah. And then finally, and this is tentative, it's tentative because I felt like there was something I thought about that I wanted to go over, but I couldn't come up with it. And so I wrote this. And I was looking at that one question, like the one God of the Testaments, the one God of both Old and New. So that's the plan. Of course, this does not rule us, so we're okay to diverge from it if there are more questions that come up. And we'll roll with it. I would like to add that I am notorious for asking questions about the class we just had previous. So take notes, be prepared to at least summarize what we've gone over in the last class, bring these notes back next week, in the Bibles, et cetera, and it'll be a fun time to see some of you all squirm. But not mocked or ridiculed, but maybe for it.
Maybe, probably.
So all that to say, we will begin with this first session. Before I begin, are there any questions? Any questions?
Not yet.
Is there anything that you're looking forward to learning from the Old Testament?
We're understanding of everything.
Just a refresher.
I'm looking forward to like a really good overview of the Old Testament, like you've called it, and just kind of seeing, I like the timeline that you've made and just kind of looking at history and how it all fits together.
Good. Yeah. All right, so for this first section, the world of the Old Testament. My goal of this is to kind of overwhelm you with the world of the Old Testament. So there's so much that's going on, and it's so beautiful and so complex. And I really hope by the end of the night that you get at least a glimpse of this. And I'm sure you already know, especially if you've read through it a number of times. It's just so complex and so beautiful to see what God is doing and how he speaks to his people and how he is guiding kings and shepherds and judges and queens and all of these different people toward one end, that one end being becoming the Messiah.
Father Fabian, I think my father had something to say.
All right.
Over here. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
can hear
right,
you.
we can hear you.
Okay. My question is, looking at the Old Testament, how much of the world did they see? When we look at it, we're talking about global world, or what is their world around the Mediterranean? Or
I'm trying to get what you're saying. Can you ask that in a different way? Are you asking about the, like in my heading, the world of the Old Testament? Are you?
looking at, we're studying the Old Testament. The Old
Yeah.
Testament is wrapped around the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
Is that the whole world as they saw it, or did they think there was a lot more to the world?
That's a good question. I'm gonna note that and we'll see what happens. But that's a good question.
Can I try and answer?
Sure.
I like to look at it as the Old Testament and the New Testament being, it's the story of the Jews. And of course, bringing forth of the Messiah. And so the focus geographically is all in the, like you said, the Mediterranean area, Israel specifically. They knew that there were places to the east and to the west, and the north and the south, obviously beyond Egypt. But this story doesn't concern themselves with that, so it doesn't get into it. It's not that they didn't know about it, it's that they just, why talk about South Africa when we're talking about Jesus?
Yeah,
That's the way I took at it.
for the reason
that
I
helpful?
ask a question like that, like when they had the big flood, to me, that could have been, the Mediterranean might have been a dry sea or something, and the Rock of Gibraltar area where you get in the Atlantic, that could have flooded. And that would seem like the whole world to them.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. But I will say, Greg, there's a lot of conversation about the blessing of the nations, right? And so like there is the sense of a greater world.
Well, that's what I mean. They knew about it, but why write about it? It's got nothing to do with the narrative of the Jews and specifically Jesus coming. Till they get into Acts and they say, okay, go.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. We'll continue exploring. All right. Any other thoughts? Thanks, Fred, for the question. All right, so a common complaint that I've gotten about the Old Testament is like what I've alluded to already. It's so complex. Why do we have to read all of these names? What are the significance of these names, and how do I pronounce them?
Yeah,
Right.
yes.
What about all these places? What's significant with Ai or Bethel or Beersheba or Jericho? What's going on with all of these, and where are they? Why does it matter? There are complexities like, how do we justify God telling the Israelites to go into Canaan and killing these people who lived there previously? And then the further complexity of what happens if they don't obey God and let these people live with them. Right? There's a lot that's hard to understand in the Old Testament. And I think that's part of the beauty of it. And that's the beauty of being able to study the Old Testament and just dig into these complexities. And I think that, no, I shouldn't say that I think. I believe that knowing the overall overview of the Old Testament and the New Testament helps us to understand those little complexities that we find in the Old Testament. So that's my hope for this class, is for you to have more questions at the end of the night than when you first came tonight. So I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. It'll be all for the better. So when we look at the scriptures of this Bible, we have to know that there are several different aspects going into the actual words being written. What I mean is that there's a literary context of the Old Testament, and in that literary context, they're speaking of a historical and geographical world that is so far from us. I looked earlier how far it is from Ridgecrest, but I forgot the number. It's thousands of miles away, right? And not only is it thousands of miles away, it's thousands of years away too, with a different society and culture and language. The Bible is written in Hebrew. The texts that we have now in Hebrew are actually a later iteration of the earliest known Hebrew text. And it's really amazing to see how all of these the books of the Bible that we have are held together, and how we can know for sure that God spoke to these people. But all that to say, there is this huge chasm between our world in 2021 and their world in even before, right? 4,000 or 5,000 BC. Yeah, exactly. So let's just jump right into Genesis 1. So if you have your Bibles, I know you have your Bibles, open up to Genesis 1. We're not going to read it. I'm willing to bet you all have read it at least a few times, especially if you've gone through the liturgy a number of times throughout the years. There's specific times that we read through it. Easter being one of them, and Christmas, the lessons and carols. So I'll start by asking you all, what is the message of Genesis 1? What's Genesis 1 about?
The creation.
Tell me more. Who's creating? What's being created?
Everything.
God's creating.
God is creating. Yep. And he's creating everything. Everything. Yeah. Literally everything.
Ex nihilo, out of nothing.
Yeah. Out of nothing. Good. Yeah. He is creating stuff out of no stuff. Which, if we want to create, we have to create out of other stuff, right? We have to use materials to create things. So God is the one who is creating out of nothing. So I'll ask the question and I'll give a few minutes for you to look over it, but what sort of literary patterns can you find in Genesis 1? You'll have to read a little bit and dig a little bit. But what are some literary patterns that you can find in Genesis 1? And once you find some, tell me, just shout it out.
He would say, "Let there be," and it was, and it was always good. That's a pattern.
Something else here is that although this thing was written 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years ago, they had a logical sequence scientifically on the progression of life on Earth. So, I mean, we could go back, the scientists could go today and say this was the logical way the Earth was created, but they were saying this is the way it was done at the very beginning of the Bible, which I think is rather interesting.
Yeah. What about, there is evening and there is a night,
Morning.
or, sorry,
There's
there's
morning
evening
and
and there is
there's
morning,
evening.
right? So evening comes first and then
Oh,
there's
there was
morning.
evening and there was morning.
Yeah.
The fourth day,
Yeah.
or the third day.
Well, the Jews still observe that.
Yeah,
The day begins at sunset.
right, yeah. Yep. And so we see that repeated a few times for each day, yeah, and it's, yeah, it's a good way to think about it. There's one that I always think about, God creates space and then he fills it. Right, so he created the heavens and the earth, he created light. If you notice, the sun and the moon comes till a different day. So there's heavens and the earth, there's light and there's darkness. In the earth, there's waters and then the earth. And then he fills the heavens with the sun and the moon to be in charge of the day and the night. And then on the earth, in the waters, and on the ground, there's the vegetation that sprouts up, and then the animals, right? The fish, and the goats and elephants and alligators, they all fill the space that they were created in. And so there's a really unique literary pattern that we see from Genesis 1. Is there anything else?
There's the creation of man and woman.
Yeah, there's the creation of man and woman. What day is that created, or are we created in?
The sixth.
Yeah. Is there evening and a morning for the sixth day?
Yeah, mine says, and there was evening and there's morning the sixth day.
Yeah.
So if it starts in the evening, is it the 24 hours? When does it end? I mean, the
Yeah.
evening, it starts at sunset.
The day goes from sunset to
To
sunset.
sunset, 24 hours.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna put a pin on that for a second. And I'll come back to it, because there's some other questions like that I want to ask. But I want to note a really interesting pattern. So we notice that there's evening and then there's morning and there's a specific day, right? Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. And then day 7, God rests. There's something missing. There's no end to the 7th day. Why is there no end to the 7th day?
Because he's done creating.
Yeah. Is he done?
Since he finished his work that he had done, because it's in all of that. Resting this.
Or are we part of that work? This is a totally different class, but really the Cliff Notes version of this is that in Hebrews, the author tells us that when we die, we enter into that 7th day and into his rest. So God has finished from his work. He is resting in that same day. Resting.
Oh, wow.
And so when we get to him, we're resting with him. And surely the kingdom of heaven is that rest here on earth, right?
There's one point right at the end of where everything's created with verse 31. God saw that he had made, and behold, it was very good. When everything taken together hangs together as God intended it to, all of a sudden it's not just good, it's very good.
Yeah, I had noticed.
Oh, yeah, no, that's right.
Very good. So, can we make any scientific claims about this passage in Genesis 1?
Which passage?
Just
All of one?
Yeah, just the whole, like, the world was created, say, 10,000 years ago, or a millennium, or,
You could say a lot about that.
yeah,
Very shortly, I would say that science, regardless of the timelines involved, that they believe, I believe wrongly, believes that the universe came from nothing. They just don't have a cause for it. They have no idea. We believe the universe came from nothing, and we do have a cause for that.
yeah. So my question kind of is leading, and I'm sorry, because that's not what you're supposed to do in a class setting. You're not supposed to lead.
Sure you are.
leading questions,
There you are.
but I did. The point of the leading question is to say that it's not really the point of Genesis 1. The point of Genesis 1 is to say that God created and he is in charge and he is the center of the world, right?
Amen.
Now we can go into endless arguments and discussions, which I feel like I had done my penance in undergrad studies and apologetics class of when the world was created and how far the stars are, and if we can figure out the meaning of the Hebrew word yom,
Yom, yeah.
right? Of the Hebrew word yom is day, which is what you were saying, Rebecca, with or kind of getting at with, like how long was the day? Was it a literal day, or was it an age or an eon or whatever? You know, it's certainly
It is.
worth talking about. Not here in this class right now, but maybe over a meal, we can certainly discuss it and figure out. But at the end of the day, our faith is not dependent on which view we hold. But it does depend on that God is the one who created, right?
Absolutely.
Thoughts?
Thing about it is, this is for storytellers. It's very easy to say a day instead of saying, well, this took 10,000 years or something like that. That's for a storyteller, this is a very clean way of doing it. And it's further in the Bible, you say 1,000 years is like a day. So we don't know what time is.
Yeah, what is time?
There,
We even do it today. People talk, you can say the day of the dinosaur. Everybody understands it's not one day of the dinosaur. It's the whole era of
Yeah.
dinosaurs. So it's,
not speaking to the question of time and day and year and eon and epoch, but speaking to whether or not there is a distinctive evidence of specific divine creation. There's a professor at Rice University in Houston by the name of James Tour. If you go to YouTube, there are a bunch of videos on it. He's generally regarded as one of the top 5 organic chemists on the planet. And he has an open invitation to anybody that can show him how a whole variety of things evolved. And nobody's been able to take him up on it. One of his principal arguments is that time is not for you in evolutionary chemistry. It's against you, because these states that are absolutely essential for an advancement last a matter of nanoseconds. And so if anybody's interested in the chemistry of this, James Tour is a great resource.
Any relationship there, Phyllis?
Who knows?
Thanks. I wrote the name down. I'm gonna look at it. It'll be interesting. Let's move on to Leviticus 15. So as you're turning to it, yeah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus
15.
Go to Genesis and turn right.
15, yeah.
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 Lots.
Um,
Lots.
yeah, so, yeah, I hope that in that discussion about Genesis, you get the sense of the importance of looking at the Bible through this literary, through a literary lens. Not only, like, we're not only gonna stop at looking at it literarily, but we gotta look at the culture behind the story being told, right? We'll get to that aspect next week, Lord willing, when we go through the whole Old Testament and look at that narrative. So Genesis 1, yes, right with more questions to be asked and certainly more things to explore and to see, really behold the beauty of the Lord and the miracle of him creating. So Leviticus 15, I'll just read a little bit and we'll get a sense of what this passage is saying, because Leviticus 15 doesn't really come up in our Sunday lecture.
No.
The Lord spoke and Moses and Aaron, or the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when any man has a discharge from his body, his discharge is unclean. And this is the law of his uncleanness for a discharge. Or for this is the law of his uncleanness. Whether his body runs with his discharge, or his body is blocked up by his discharge, it is his uncleanness. Every bed on which the one with the discharge lies shall be unclean, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. And everyone who touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening." So the passage continues on, basically saying, whatever is coming out is unclean. And it doesn't just stop at men, but women also. And what is actually happening literarily is there's this chiastic structure. So if we look at if we put out what is being said, it's talking about the uncleanness of a man, and then whatever comes out, and then it's talking about sexual intercourse. And then it talks about whatever comes out of a woman. And so there's this pattern of uncleanness. So that it's just kind of a literary aspect of the passage to get at this point of this idea of being unclean. But so what does that have to do with us as Christians in 2021? Any guesses? Anybody squirming? Thinking about discharges?
I was thinking, what you said as Christians, I'm not sure. I was just thinking of disease like AIDS or sexual transmitted diseases. But that probably has nothing to do with as Christians. I don't know. Just the way the time and dates are nowadays.
Any thoughts? So when we look at the law, the 5 books of the law, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, there are so many things that are said that the people of the Israelites have to abide by. That we get the 10 Commandments, Exodus 20. It doesn't just stop there. it goes into how the Levites have to conduct themselves within the presence of God and what they're to wear. It goes into how people have to deal with their neighbor's oxen, their oxen gores their ox. It goes into laws about moving boundaries, like fences. So there's so much going on in those books, right? And it can be kind of deduced to or reduced to these different laws. So we have the moral law, so what's right and what's wrong. So if we look at these different laws, we can say, oh, in the case of these oxen, we have to take care of our own stuff. We can't just let our ox just wander aimlessly and potentially kill the livelihood of our neighbors, right? Then there's the civil law, and really that's what it goes into also. Say your ox goes and gores your neighbor's ox, what happens? Well, in this case, in the law, you basically have to either pay the price of that ox that was killed, or you give them your ox, right? Ox for ox, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, like foot for foot. That's Deuteronomy, right? And then there's the ceremonial law. So we have the moral law, the civil law, and then the ceremonial law, which means that all of the Levites and really people who are in the tabernacle and who will be in the temple will have to abide by these specific laws to be clean. And that's where we get to this aspect in Leviticus 15. The bottom line of this is that there's a necessity for people to be holy. We know from the scripture, God calls us to be holy as he is holy, right? But I'd like to make the distinction that to be unclean doesn't mean to be in sin.
Doesn't mean to be what?
To be in sin. It's not sinful to be unclean. Right? So if people, like say unbelievers are reading the Old Testament, they see where they're reading all of this stuff and saying, women are just gonna, it's like natural for them to have periods. Like, why is it, like, and they're gonna just get really angry. But the point isn't that this uncleanness is sinful, right? There's a distinction, right? And there's actually a really interesting societal, or how should I say, medical perspective in this, right? We know that diseases are transmittable, right? And so, in just kind of thinking about what comes out of people, like those things can be transmitted to other people. And so just having that, like paying attention, think about it, we're in a pandemic. These things, like this is a way that God is protecting his people from dying on, right? Or whatever. Even thinking about pork.
Mhm.
If you don't cook pork long enough, bad things can happen.
Same with shellfish.
Some bad body
Yeah. Right.
Sorry. So
Kind of throw you a softball.
yeah, sure.
I mean, first of all, for us interpreting it, we can look at it through Jesus's eyes, which of course they didn't have the opportunity to do, and which most Jews don't choose to do today. But when he healed the lepers, he said, go back, show yourself to the priest, because the priest was the one that had to declare them healed as far as the community was concerned. And so Jesus was still affirming the law. And he goes further. He says, listen, you think I came to abolish the law? No way. Every jot and tittle of the law will be fulfilled. So the question is, so what do you think of that verse?
It's funny you should say that. I had my question right here is how does Jesus fulfill the law?
I told you that it was a softball.
Yeah, what do you guys think? What do you at home have to say about that? How does Jesus fulfill the law and this law?
Dr. Fauci hasn't told them about the mask. They should all be wearing masks by now. If you want to stay clean.
Well, Jesus told us that when he asked the guys, what's or they asked him, what's the most important commandment? He said, love the Lord your God and then love your neighbor as yourself is the second.
Yeah.
And really, all these laws are, in a general way, kind of reinforce that. You look at the 10 Commandments, and that's all about, the first 5 are about loving God, and the second 5 are about loving your neighbor. So a lot of these are along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah. So to kind of tack onto that question, so Jesus preaches on the Sermon on the Mount. He says, you have heard it said, anyone kills, what does he say?
Murders, actually.
Yeah, murders. Yeah, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that kind of thing, should make amends. So where the law, the Torah restricts evil, Jesus absolutely forbids it. In that he goes as far as to say, don't even murder, don't even be angry, right? Don't be adulterous, don't even lust. Right, so this isn't tooth for tooth, foot for foot kind of thing anymore. It's like, don't even just turn the other cheek, right? Go with the guy 2 miles instead of the one that he's asked for. So Jesus fulfills the law in a really profound way. And really the bottom line of Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount, is that we can't do this. And Jesus calls us to be more righteous than the Pharisees, who have all these laws down theoretically, right?
Mhm.
But so we need somebody to help us fulfill these laws. But again, that's another class.
The word or the intent.
Just an addendum to James Stewart, when he was in college, he was Jewish. And the thing that brought him to faith, that stirred it up so that he could not leave Jesus without doing a full investigation, which finally led him to come to faith, was just exactly this approach. And looking at a woman with lust was the thing that just absolutely pierced his heart, which is one of the things which, when you see this preeminent biologist, you're going, and you started back here in college with this simple realization.
Luther had the same problem. Everything he did, he saw the sin in it. Finally, the people that he was confessing to said, give it a rest. Lighten up.
Yeah, so moving on, I've done it again. I've put way too much on this to actually get through in one night.
That's for sure.
So let's move on to Judges 9:53. So this is actually one of my favorite things to look at when we're looking at the literary context of the scriptures, and then also the historical and geographical nature of the Old Testament. So my point in all of what I'm about to say is that there's technological change happening throughout the whole Old Testament. So when I get to Judges 9:53 says this. And a certain woman threw an upper millstone at Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. So in short, the context of the story is Abimelech is trying to take over his father's house and actually kill 70 of his brothers, 70 of the people in the house, in his father's house. And he's trying to stage this coup, right? And eventually he gets to this tower and he's trying to lay siege to it. And it says this certain woman threw the upper millstone and crushed his skull. And it goes on to say that he turns to his armor bearer and says, kill me with the sword so that nobody can say that I was killed by one. Right? So just an interesting story in its own right. But what I want to focus on is this millstone. This millstone is the upper millstone used to grind wheat. And it's really interesting to think about the technological development in really the whole of scriptures that we have to pay attention to when we're reading the scriptures. Because if we turn to Matthew 18:6, we don't have to turn there. I'll just say that it's when Jesus says, if any of you makes one of these little ones sins, it's better for you to have a millstone tied to your neck and thrown into the sea, right? So think about the difference between this millstone. In Judges 9:53, we have this millstone that's being chucked out of a window and crushing the head of this guy. And in Matthew 18, we have this millstone that's being tied to the son's neck and being dropped. Right? There's something going on. Either we have a really strong woman in Judges 9 that's chucking this millstone, or simply there's a different technology being used, right? So it's this little point that there's just a development, like a natural technological development happening in that world as much as our world. So there are little things that we can pay attention to. You don't have to get as nerdy or excited as I can about a millstone, but it certainly just it shows the complexity of that world that we're reading. Yeah, so moving on to the geographical significance. I won't talk about Amos tonight. I want to go to Psalm 133, which is actually one of the Psalms we read in morning prayer this morning. So it says this: behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. It is like the precious oil on the head running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robes. It is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord has commanded the blessing, life forevermore. So there's a lot going on in this really short, simple song. And the unique aspect of the song is that there's a huge geographical significance in this song. There's this imagery that those who are reading the song, praying the song, would know right off the bat that the psalmist is making an analogy. So he's saying that the companionship of brothers and sisters, family, is as good as the oil that's being poured on this Levite, with the line of Aaron, right? that's coming down, and this rich oils, the blessing of God that's going down his head and into his beard and collar and into his robes, right? We have this rich blessing of God. And he's making the analogy from that to that of the waters, the dew that's coming down on Hermon, all the way to Zion. So I have in the appendix three, a map of Israel. I won't go into the details of this map. I'll let you kind of explore for yourself, but Mount Hermon is at the very top of the page. Kind of north of the Sea of Galilee. So those who read the psalm know that Mount Hermon is all the way up there. It's totally north. Not only is it north geographically, but it's high in elevation. What do we know about water? Water goes down the path of least resistance, right? So the water starts from up high, the highest point of Israel, runs down into Dan, into that basin through the Sea of Galilee, and continues south in Jordan River, goes into the Dead Sea, and that's that part of the water, right? We have other water that's going farther down and just throughout all of Israel. So this water is the blessing of God, right? The blessing, like the oil that's being poured down on the head, all the way up north, and running down the head, down the beard, collar, and robes, right? So we have this interconnectedness of the land and the people, right? We're getting all of these geographical clues of the blessing of God. And there's so much packed in the Old Testament of these clues, these geographical places, right? All of these places have significance. People have died in some of these places. People have met the Lord in a unique way, right? Jacob at Bethel, the house of God, right? All of these places are significant. And what it leads to is this, the writing of the psalm, right? Not just this song, but other songs and other songs that we sing. But that, all of that to say, there's we have to pay attention to the land that the people are living in. And that's why I wanted to include this map. And certainly in all of your Bibles, you should have maps. And it's a really fun exercise to actually have a map in front of you when you're reading the Old Testament and try to figure out where these places are. And again, I'll continue to say this can be a different class of the actual geography of the land. Even not just classes, but semesters and lifetimes, right? There's so much packed into the Old Testament that we Are there any thoughts or questions or comments? I feel like I can probably talk another hour about all of this.
Well, I'm kind of hung up on this uncleanness.
Mhm.
And you're saying that it isn't related to sin. Why is it even called unclean? I mean, I'm thinking of semen and intercourse. Why would that be unclean?
It's a good question. So if we're gonna talk about like sexual intercourse, we have to talk about it in the context of the scriptures. So we know from within the scriptures that it's supposed to be within the realm of marriage.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. But if it is, why is it unclean?
That's a
What
good
about
question.
venereal disease?
I think it'd be worth writing it down and looking into it. And my prophecy is coming true. You'll have more questions coming out of this class than you did coming in. And I'm, yeah, I don't have an answer offhand. And that's kind of the beauty of the scriptures. You can search it out.
The Israelis had a lot of ceremony on what they eat and what they have as far as clean dishes and everything like that. I think that all goes back to some sort of health issues, that you had diseases back when they started out here, and this is the way they combated the diseases, by having these rituals about cleanliness.
But it's not just physical cleanliness. For instance, if a Jew entered the household of a Gentile, that would make them ceremonially unclean. So that's got nothing to do with, I agree with you on the cleanliness aspect. I think that, that's it, but it's more than just that. It's what they should and shouldn't do.
I understand, yes. But like pork and things like that, that we know that there's a lot of disease involved with that. And they didn't know it at the time. They just knew it was bad. And so the best way to get rid of something is just, you don't know about, you just don't do it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like shellfish.
Yeah.
In fact, the Seventh-day Adventists still follow those laws. They won't eat pork and they won't eat shellfish.
Now, I don't eat shellfish either, but that's for a different reason.
There's nothing wrong with doing that if you want to live that way. I mean,
I had a pet.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm just gonna breeze through the rest of this. We have, well, it's 7 o'clock, so we don't have any time. To further add the complexities of not only literary aspects or societal or cultural or geographical fits of Old Testament, we have different genres, right? We have poetry, we have history, we have prophecies, we have law, we have narratives, we have all of these kinds of types of writings. Not only do we have those kinds of writings, but we have different kinds of authors. We have kings and shepherds and war shepherds and queens and prophets, scribes, fishermen. We have all these different people who are writing the scriptures, right? And we know from 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is God breathed and profitable for teaching, proof, and general admonishment, right? Encouragement. So, yeah, there are all these different things that we have to pay attention to when we read the Old Testament. So I'll talk about the appendix in a minute. We have these different parts of the Old Testament we have to head out. All right, thanks for coming. Yeah, so we know from the English version of the scriptures, we have all these different historical books like 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, etc., right? We have mainly these historical books, these historical things that are going on. From Assyria coming down from the south, and then Egypt coming from, Assyria from the north, Egypt from the south, right? And all of these different people coming down. And we have wisdom literature, the Psalms, the Proverbs, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, all is vanity, vanity of vanities, right? We have all these different kinds of books. I wanted to point out in the Jewish Old Testament, the Tanakh, it's really interesting to think about the endings of each of these segments. So what I mean is that there are three segments: the Torah, the Nevi'im, which is the prophets, and then the Ketuvim, which are the writings. So we have essentially the same types of books, but they categorize them differently. So if we look at each category of the Tanakh, the Torah, and then so the law, the prophets, and the writings, at the end of each category, we have what the authors are trying to look toward. So what I mean is, at the end of the law, we see Moses saying that there will be a better prophet that comes after me. In the prophets, Malachi is the end of that category. We have Malachi, the prophet Malachi, saying there's going to be a better priest that comes. Right, and I'm sure you can guess this last category, the last writings, the category of the writings, there's going to be a better king that comes. So the prophet, priest, and king is coming. And that certainly shapes the way that we read the entirety of the scriptures as the one Messiah who is coming, who is, not only will be, but is the prophet, priest, and king. So there's so much fun stuff to be searched out in the scriptures. And I've given you all these different, what's multiples of appendix? Appendixi?
Appendi?
Appendi?
I don't know. Appendices.
Appendices, that sounds right. So the first appendix, we have a lot more information that you probably bargained for tonight. But basically, they're the different ages of the old world, I should say. So it has a category. So before 20,000, there's a zero missing there. Paleolithic age, it has a little bit about that age. So earliest human remains in Israel. We have hunter-gatherer lifestyle. The oldest site is Euphidea, near the Sea of Galilee. So you can read through this at your leisure. It has a lot of really interesting cultural and societal bits about specific ages. So if and when you start reading through the Old Testament again, probably, you can have this handy and think about, like, when you're reading about David, thinking about that in the Iron Age 2A. And it has a little bit about what is going on in that age. And yeah, it goes all the way through really present day Israel. So it even has bits of the Crusaders, the Caliphate coming through and control of Israel. So that's appendix 1. Appendix 2 is on its side. But it has all of the, and you might need my magnifying glass for this, I'm sorry. But it has all the kings and prophets of Israel and Judah. So we had a line of kings, starting with Saul, David, Solomon, and then when the two or the one kingdom divided into the northern and the southern, and then all the kings of the northern kingdom, and then all the kingdoms of the southern kingdom, and then all the different prophets that come up in the specific ages. And what we see is some prophets sometimes overlap. And it's just really interesting to kind of think about. And even categorize these different prophets that we're reading and just kind of think about Jonah is in the same time of Amos. And just kind of thinking about different bits of that. So Charity isn't on anymore. She's so Charity has this book. It's reading through the whole Old Testament. But what they've done is they put all of the books and really all the stories chronologically. So she's reading through the whole Old Testament, basically using this. And she didn't do the work. It's been done. But it's been really fascinating, really for both of us to kind of think about the stories that we have in our traditional books, all just chronologically. And then finally, we have the map. There's colored, and the computer can probably zoom in a little bit better. Again, there's so much to be said about the map, right? We can see all the different topography of it and see where the water is flowing. We can even think about how would Assyria move through the land of Israel? Well, they probably moved through it, and they did, like the water would have least resistance. Oh, there's a giant rock in the way, or there's a giant cave in the way. Let's move around and go a different way. But there are all these sorts of questions that can be asked when we're looking at maps. All right, I'm done. Do we have any questions? Or any bits of curiosity or things we hadn't thought about before and find interesting now?
So Jesus, when he's 13, is in the temple, carrying on a discourse with the tribes, with the scribes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking he probably had to be able to read Hebrew. And if that's the case, when did he start reading? How much did he know? And how unusual was that? I don't know if we have any indication of any of those things, but it certainly is a curiosity for me.
Yeah.
When is, in modern times, when do Jewish boys have a bar mitzvah? Isn't that at 13?
12.
12, 13? So they have to be able to read because they have to recite a certain amount of stuff. So, and they said Joseph was a devout man. So he's had to have, in answer to your question, he had to have thought of, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but when did the ceremony of the bar mitzvah begin?
Good point. I don't know that.
Yeah, it'd be worth finding out because that certainly would affect how we would answer that question, right?
True.
Questions?
They have one for a girl.
Yeah.
So I have a question about Leviticus, where it says, if anyone who touches his bed shall wash his clothes, bathe himself in water and be unclean. So he does all that and they're still unclean until the evening. Or is that what it means? And be unclean until the evening. So once the evening hits, after they've done all that, they're still not clean until the evening, right? Is that what that means?
Till the end of the day, right?
Yeah, they have to wait till the end of the day,
Yeah.
no matter.
Get to make it unclean again.
Yeah. It's vicious.
All right. Well,
So another question though,
okay.
what you said about the prophet, priest, and king is coming. So the Jewish people are still waiting for Jesus, right?
Right.
That's why they don't believe in our Jesus. They're still waiting for him to come.
Right, they're still waiting for the Messiah.
But
What's interesting, okay,
as all things Jewish, it's more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Because they're actually looking, depending upon the sects, and there are 5 major sects of ultra-Orthodox Jews.
Okay,
They're looking for 2 messiahs.
right,
They're looking for the ruler king, David Messiah, that's going to save the nation. And they're looking for the suffering servant Messiah. Those that have read Isaiah 53, which has been removed from there, it's still in the text, but they no longer study it intentionally. So
Right,
it's like,
Isaiah 53.
yeah, and
They
so
don't
to
read it.
marry these two in the form of Jesus is just like, that's really stretchful.
So good.
So the Jews for Jesus, that organization, what do they believe? I mean, how do they believe their faith as a Jew, but still
They,
believe Jesus is the Messiah?
Yes.
Jews for Jesus is uniquely an American institution. It works in Israel, but its roots in the United States. The Messianic Jews in Israel, I mean, they take this whole book, Old Testament, the Tanakh, and what do they call the New Testament in Hebrew? They take it very seriously, and they bring a lot more to it because they understand the cultural context of a lot. So it's not Jesus, it's Yeshua, which in Hebrew actually means salvation. Okay, so like when Mary called him in for dinner, it was, hey, salvation, dinner's ready. And she's just going, who is this? Do you understand what I'm saying? And so it's, yeah, and again, all things Jewish. The story goes on for there, what God is doing today in the nation of Israel. More about that.
Yeah, I actually had a Jewish rabbi teach a class on Jesus' parables when I was in Israel, actually. So there, it was to that point of like they bring so much to the cultural aspects of what Jesus is teaching.
Wow.
I think the
Oh,
Jews for Jesus consider themselves completed Jews.
yeah, well, I've heard them called both, yeah, completed Jews. I didn't know if they were the same.
All right, I gotta wrap it up. So,
I didn't know how long we were going. I thought it was 2 hours or
7:00.
an hour and a half, so it's only an hour.
Right.
Take it 6 to 7. Oh, man, you're gonna do all this. I even thought 2 hours was a stretch.
No,
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
all this research.
Mhm.
I mean, that's really a lot of work and very helpful.
good. I hope that it is helpful. And,
You enjoy it. I can tell you.
oh yeah, I sure do. And really, it's, I mean, years of study, really, and being able to walk in the land. I spent a semester in Israel. So I got up close and personal
Nice.
and got the dust of the land in my feet from sandals and stuff, so. Yeah, I love, really, at the end of the day, being able to communicate that to you all. And that's really the point of it, right? And just to be able to dig into it together.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, let's pray real quick. God, thanks again for this evening. Thank you for all of these folks. I just pray that you will bless them and keep them. Pray that you will make your face to shine upon them and be gracious to them and give them peace. So God, we pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all on at home.
Well,
Father Fabian. See you next time.
Hi, guys.
but